This is Berkeley in Gloucestershire, where my next hero was born. He was just a country doctor, and yet he made what has been described as the most important discovery in the history of medicine. He invented vaccination, and his name was Edward Jenner.
Edward Jenner was born in Berkeley in 1749, studied medicine in London and came back to be a doctor in his hometown. He was fascinated by hedgehogs. He measured their temperature when they were hibernating, and also by cuckoos. He watched and described how the cuckoo chick pushed the rival chicks and eggs out of the nest.
Jenner was such a brilliant naturalist that he was elected a Fellow of the Royal Society and invited to go on his next voyage with Captain Cook all the way around the world as official scientist. But he said, no thanks, I'd rather stay at home. Now, he was a bit of a dandy. He had very shiny black boots, and he used to ride around the countryside on his horse with silver spurs, and he noticed that the milkmaids were very pretty. Indeed, there was a song about it. What is your fortune, my pretty maid? My face is my fortune, sir, she said. Now, part of the reason for this was that the milkmaids never seemed to get smallpox. Smallpox was a real killer in those days. Almost everyone got it. A quarter of them died. It was as bad a killer as cancer is today. Millions went blind, and most people wound up with terrible scars on their faces. So Jenner started asking questions. Everyone else thought it was an old wives' tale, but he took it seriously. And he asked the milkmaids, why don't you get smallpox? And they said, oh no, we'll never get smallpox because we've had the cowpox. Cowpox was a disease that affected the cow's udders. And what they would get is a sore patch on their udders and some sores on their teats here. Just little lumps. I'm sorry, old girl. They would get little sore patches on their teats, and occasionally, if the milkmaids had perhaps a little cut on the hands, the infection would get in, and the milkmaids would get spots on their hands. They'd be poorly for a day or two, but they never got really ill, but it seemed to give them protection from the smallpox. So Jenner studied the cowpox, studied the cows, he questioned the milkmaids, and he asked so many questions of his colleagues and friends, the doctors, that he made himself a real cowpox bore, so much so that he was banned from his local medical club.
For 12 years he stayed with his aunt, and then in 1785, when he was 36, he came to live here in Berkeley. The house is called Chantry Cottage. While he was here, he worked out how to protect the world from smallpox.
His idea was this: if the cowpox protected the milkmaids, maybe he could inoculate other people with cowpox, and so protect them too. Now, the Latin for cow was vacca, and so the technique came to be called vaccination. Jenner was ridiculed. People thought they would turn into cows or have bits of cows growing out of them, and many doctors said he was mad. One problem was that cowpox was rare. There was only one case every few years. But in 1796, a cow called Blossom got cowpox, and the milkmaid, Sarah Nelms, caught cowpox through a cut in her hand. On the 14th of May, 1796, Jenner carried out his critical experiment. For his guinea pig, he chose a healthy young lad, James Phipps, aged 8, and he chose him partly because James hadn't had either smallpox or cowpox. He called him here into his study, and he took a little knife, possibly even this one, and he used it to make two little cuts, just like that, really scratches half an inch long, on the boy's arm. Then he called in Sarah Nelms, the milkmaid, and he squeezed some of the pus out of one of the cowpox on her hands and rubbed the pus into the scratches on the boy's arm. Sure enough, James Phipps caught cowpox. A week later, he complained of a sore arm. On the 9th day, he lost his appetite, he felt a little chilly, and basically wasn't very well. But on the 10th day, he was perfectly okay. On the 1st of July, James Phipps was inoculated with smallpox. But he didn't catch it. They tried again and again, and he never did catch smallpox. Indeed, he lived to a ripe old age. And the fact that he didn't catch smallpox was absolutely critical, because Edward Jenner had his proof. This magnificent building is the Temple of Vaccinia, which was built for Jenner, and this was where he used to vaccinate the poor for free. It's decorated with all sorts of wonderful old trees and things. Although he published his results in 1796, it took ages for anyone to accept them. They didn't rush up with their arms bared to be vaccinated. It was actually 10 years before he got recognition. Finally, in 1806, he was given £20,000 for the most important discovery ever in the history of medicine. By 1812, more than 1 million people had been vaccinated, and in 1978, the last ever case of smallpox was recorded in Somalia. Now, smallpox is a thing of the past. It's been wiped off the face of the earth, thanks to Edward Jenner and his vaccination. No, no, no.